What's up, Buttercups? Today's episode includes experiences with depression, anxiety, and thoughts of self-harm, so please take care while listening. Welcome to Sassy, Soulful, and Sensitive, a podcast for us introverts, empaths, and highly sensitive people. I'm your host, Cam Swell, and together we are going to explore what it's like to build an empowered life with our sensitivities. We're learning how to trust our intuition and trust our voice. Let's dive in. Hello, my beautiful friends. So today I want to have a real and raw conversation about depression and anxiety through the lens of a highly sensitive person. And I also want to clarify some distinctions between coaching and therapy, because this is a very common question that is asked all the time. So this isn't like today's episode isn't just going to be like another clinical breakdown about anxiety and depression and coaching and therapy. But I do want to make it very clear, I'm a mental wellness professional and not a mental health professional, and that distinction matters, which we'll dive more into this later. But this topic today is something that is very deeply personal to me. And if you have followed my blog or podcast, you know that I tend to take breaks, sometimes weeks or months at a time. And my most recent break has lasted 6 months. And it was not accidental. It was a necessary pause. I was navigating the deepest and darkest depression I've experienced in over a decade. And today I am pulling back the curtain on that journey, and I want to share what I've learned about this delicate balance between therapy and coaching. And this is especially important when your mind just feels like quicksand, your sensitive soul feels everything deeply. So of course, depression and anxiety affect many people, not just us highly sensitive folks. But because we tend to think and feel deeply, we tend to be more susceptible to chronic depression and anxiety. So while I am not a psychologist or therapist, I do have some experiential wisdom, and my hope is that this episode can provide some insight and support. So to start out, I want to share a little bit of my own personal journey with depression and anxiety. So I've battled depression and anxiety and suicidal thoughts since childhood, so over 30 years. And this journey has taught me that mental health and wellness is very complex, it's very nuanced, and it is deeply personal for every individual. My most recent depressive episode was the worst in over a decade, and it underscored the need for a very holistic approach, one that blends mental health with mental wellness. And I want to be clear, I'm not talking about emotions like sadness or stress. Depression and anxiety, for me and many others, are chronic conditions that require ongoing management. And this is why understanding that difference between coaching and therapy is so important. So first, before I dive into the differences, I want to discuss the experience of what it's like to live with depression and anxiety. And I want to offer this as a way to mirror or relate to those who deal with these conditions. And I also want to help those who don't understand what this experience is like, either due to lack of experience, knowledge, or just plain exposure. So what does it feel like to live with depression and anxiety? And again, it's living with more than just an emotion of sadness. Depression mixed with anxiety, it really distorts your reality, and it's shaped by a very relentless internal dialogue and inner critic. And it's just this constant swirling of thoughts of things like you're worthless and you don't matter. People don't genuinely like you. They're just pretending. And the world is hopeless and you can't change anything. And then you add anxiety on top of that. And it's okay, one mistake, it's going to cause everything to fall apart. Don't fuck it up. And you're never doing enough. And you're always behind and you'll never catch up. And other people are always better. And this cycle is never going to end. Right? It just becomes this spiraling. And despite being a certified life coach with a shit ton of tools, Like, I'm not immune to these thoughts or this experience. And when I'm in a depressive episode, even the simplest tasks, getting out of bed, journaling, taking a shower, brushing my teeth, uh, thoughtful self reflection, like all of that can feel like climbing Mount Everest. And I remember a particular day last year trying to get ready for a dinner that I have with friends quarterly. And it took a lot of energy to get there, but I did show up. And when we were scheduling our next dinner, one of the immediate thoughts that popped into my head was, if I'm still alive by then. That thought absolutely terrified me. It truly was this wake-up call, and it made me realize I needed deeper support beyond what I could access alone, and more support than just my spouse, my friends, and my coach. With that said, now let's dive into what's the difference between coaching and therapy, because understanding that difference is very, very crucial, especially for those of us who feel deeply and who may need extra support. So these support systems serve very different but very complementary roles. So first, let's talk about therapy. So therapy, it's led by licensed mental health professionals. These are your therapists, your counselors, your psychologists, your psychiatrists. They diagnose and they treat mental health disorders, things like major depression, generalized anxiety, PTSD, OCD, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole book, DCSM-5, that lists all of the disorders, right? But they also focus on processing past trauma and deep emotional wounds. They help to, or they aim to restore just baseline functionality and well-being, and they provide deep psychological healing. Whereas coaching, which is led by mental wellness professionals, these are your coaches and your mentors, they focus on the present and creating a very intentional future, goal setting, skill development, and achieving future aspirations. And coaches help clients overcome roadblocks, gain clarity, and find purpose. They build mental resilience and emotional regulation skills, and they work on perspective shifts in mindset. And like, think of therapy as kind of helping you out of a hole. It helps you regain functionality on a very foundational level and build that strong foundation, while coaching supports you in creating momentum and direction in moving forward. So it would be a big disservice for me to talk about this and not talk about the overlap between therapy and coaching, because there is some overlap. And many of my clients and I use both therapy and coaching to achieve these optimal results that we're wanting. And I want you to just picture like a Venn diagram with overlapping areas. So the Venn diagram is like the two circles that has like a little bit overlapping. So this overlap is what we're talking about right now. And it's like, okay, the things that are the same, it's like, okay, we're validating experiences. We are talking about emotional regulation, and moving forward in life and setting and achieving goals. All of those things are true. And it's like, think of it like chocolate and peanut butter. It's like they are delicious alone, but they are amazingly delicious when they're together. And therapy and coaching, again, can be very powerful alone, but sometimes can be even better together. So why do we need both when these kind of chronic depression, anxiety things hit? So a little bit more about my story. Like, coaching was sufficient for my needs until it wasn't. Like, during this time, like, I was witnessing my husband working through his own trauma and uncovering his own PTSD and things like that. And I was trying to support him through that with his other care teams, like his therapist and psychiatrist. And like, as I was trying to help support him, like, I started to get triggered. And as I was removing certain roadblocks, I unearthed some deeper unresolved trauma for myself. And all of this kind of just led to my depression and my anxiety worsening. And like, my meds weren't working as effectively as they used to. I realized what I was going through was outside of the coaching realm. And so I ended up discussing this with my medical practitioner because like all of the tools that I was trying to that I've been trained in and that I have been using for years, like they were not accessible to me. Like intentional, like even creating intentional thoughts was very, very difficult for me. And so my medical practitioner referred me to a psychiatrist. And then later on, working with a psychiatrist, recommended a therapist. And after working with my therapist for a while, she described something so beautifully. And it's like what I was kind of going through, it was like having a festering wound that had healed over. So the wound, even though like it was healed over, it wasn't completely healed underneath. So all of that to say, like coaching is not a substitute for therapy. It has a different role that can support therapy. And likewise, therapy is not always a replacement for coaching, as both focus on different parts of personal growth and your well-being. So knowing the specific advantages of each can help people make better choices about their development and reach their goals. So at this point, I would also be remiss, for lack of a better word, to not talk about medication and how does medication help manage depression and anxiety for us highly sensitive people. Medication is not a one-size-fits-all. Like it is not the all end-all be-all solution, but for many, myself included, it is a vital tool when used strategically and intentionally. And finding the right medication, let's be honest here, like it takes patience, it takes tracking, it takes like working with the right medical professionals to help figure that out. And as a highly sensitive person, medication side effects, like they can hit harder. So advocacy is crucial, which we're going to get to in a little bit. But I want you to think of mental health and wellness in two different parts. So we have our mental and like emotional mindset and experience, and like therapy and coaching can absolutely help with this. But then some of us also have this biological or physiological aspect, which is where medication and psychiatry comes into play. So for years, like I was managing depression with medication and with therapy in the past and coaching. Like there were times where I was coaching and on medication where I wasn't going to therapy, and it was great. But as these triggers that I mentioned surface, like my mental health and my mental wellness just like started to decline. And I realized I needed therapy and medication adjustments in order to really continue on this healing journey that I was on. And coaching couldn't reach certain parts of me that needed that deeper healing. And so working with a psychiatrist, like we tried several different medications, and it took a couple of years to kind of find the right cocktail of medications that worked for me. And finding this right cocktail of medications like really has allowed me to delve into that deeper healing that I'm working on in therapy. And the meds just help me feel more stable in order to access those pieces. And so it should also be noted, like medication is not always a long-term solution. Sometimes like it just helps you reach this stable point so you can face bigger issues, which like once you kind of face some of those issues, like it may lead to stopping the medication later, right? But regardless, when medication's involved, like it is very, very important to work with your mental and medical health team to kind of determine what is best for you. Because again, it's goes back to those two parts, right? The mental and emotional mindset and experience versus the biological and physiological side. So those are the two pieces at play. So I also want to discuss some effective coping strategies for highly sensitive people because, as I mentioned, like HSPs, we're more susceptible to mental health disorders and also trauma. And like, again, this is due to our deep thinking and deep feeling abilities. And it can sometimes be the double-edged sword, right? Our sensitivity can be one of our greatest strengths. However, it also means that we need to be extra vigilant about our mental health and wellness and our support systems and our own self-care. So I want to help provide some guidance or some tools to help you navigate those overwhelming emotions that have really helped me kind of navigate the storm. So first we have mindful grounding. So engaging in mindfulness is huge. And like that could be deep breathing exercises. That can be my favorite because it's so fast is like rubbing your fingertips together, feeling the ridges, and just being mindful in the moment, in the present. So second is sensory regulation. So that is more about like creating a very calming space by managing your sensory environment, your external environment. So consider things like noise canceling headphones or earplugs. I have loops and I absolutely love them. And things like lighting and music, and I got candles and incense going quite often, right? So creating that sensory regulation, that sensory environment that helps you kind of also regulate. Another aspect of this is creative expression. So channeling your feelings through art or writing or music or organization, but expressing that in some creative way. So because sometimes like just expressing yourself in some creative external way does help you process complex emotions. So another piece of this is structured breaks. So schedule regular breaks in your day to check in with yourself. Maybe it is a quick body scan. Maybe it is 5 minutes to journal. Maybe it's going for a walk. Like any of these things can do absolute wonders, but creating structured breaks and giving yourself the time to have those breaks is huge. And last but not least is boundaries. Like learn to say no and protect your energy. And to be honest, sometimes this might mean stepping back from situations that are too overwhelming until you are resourced again. And these techniques, like while they can be simple, like they can provide a lifeline during these particularly challenging moments. And this is also why building a strong support team is crucial. And so again, for me, that was therapy to understand and process and heal trauma-related patterns. It's coaching to set goals and cultivate just like this forward-focused mindset. And then working with my psychiatrist and medication to manage the physiological and biological aspects of depression and anxiety. So again, each of these tools and different types of support serve different purposes, but together they create a very holistic approach to managing mental health and mental wellness. Okay, so now let's talk about how to advocate for our own mental well-being and choose the right support. The most important lesson I've learned is that you have to be your strongest advocate. Advocating for your mental well-being means knowing what you need and seeking the right support. And here's how to decide what is best for you. Because sometimes, let's be honest, sometimes it can be really hard to know what we need, especially when we're in the throes of a depressive or anxious episode. So first, we need to assess our current needs. So it's like, okay, are you dealing with unresolved trauma and deep emotional pain? If so, therapy might be the best fit. Like, are you looking to break patterns, improve your mindset, and like really just focus on moving forward? Then coaching might be the best fit. And if you are feeling stuck and unsure of what will help, a mix of both therapy and coaching could be beneficial. So next, consider if medication is needed. Like if your depression or anxiety feels biological, meaning that it is persistent regardless of external circumstances and like mindset work and just like trying to stay positive and all that good stuff, like medication could be worth exploring with your medical professionals and your medical team. And I would also say like work with a psychiatrist specifically, and don't be afraid to like really advocate for yourself, because again, as an HSP, those side effects can hit harder, or they can also be like just a little bit more nuanced. So this is where like tracking and all of that stuff kind of comes into play, because really it's like the next piece of this is really trust yourself and be willing to experiment. Like your mental well-being support like is not a one size fits all, right? So what works for someone else may not work for you. That's totally cool, as long as you're open and willing to experiment to figure out what that is for you. So if one therapist, if a coach, or a certain treatment or medication like doesn't fit, it doesn't work the way you want it to, like keep looking, keep having those conversations, because you deserve, you truly do deserve support that helps you. We all do. So advocacy means recognizing your needs and taking action, even when depression or anxiety make it feel impossible. And it's also important to note, like, that even though like doctors and therapists and coaches are experts in their field, that you are the expert on you. You're the top leading expert on you. Like, trust yourself to know when something isn't working, and then seek solutions that align with your needs. This is where our responsibility for our own healing and our own just overall experience comes into play. So previously I mentioned my husband's experience with unearthing some of his trauma, and he's dealt with depression and suicidality as well. And so I also wanted to talk about like how can we support someone that is going through like a major depressive episode. And if you've never experienced depression, it can be easy to suggest solutions like look on the bright side, or just stay busy, or focus on serving others. And while these things can be helpful for someone who's feeling down or sad or lonely, like they don't address the deeper struggles that come with chronic depression. And depression isn't just laziness or selfishness. And some people who have not like dealt with depression in this way, like that's kind of how they see it sometimes. And like depression is an illness that robs people of their strength and of their identity almost. Like it alters their perception of reality and of themselves and of other people. And it just makes it really, really hard to see things clearly. So supporting someone with depression is not about fixing them. It is about showing up. And so here are some ways to do that. First, listen without judgment. Like avoid giving advice unless asked, because just being there can be really powerful. Another thing is check in regularly. Like a simple thinking of you text message or email like truly can mean the world to someone when they are in the depths of depression. Like encourage them to seek professional help. Therapy, coaching, medication, like all can play a role in healing. But like if someone's in like a major depressive piece, like professional help is crucial. And then another great way is to help with small tasks. Like depression can make, like I mentioned, like it makes everyday tasks seem overwhelming and sometimes unsurmountable. So offering to run an errand or clean or make a meal can feel so deeply supportive. Even if there's other emotions in there for the depressed person. Like if someone offered to clean or make a meal, like I would kind of feel embarrassed about it. But at the same time, it feels so supportive. It can be really, 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 I don't even have the word. It's just, it just makes all of the emotions okay. It's okay to be embarrassed. So another aspect of all of this, and especially if like you're helping with small tasks, this can be a really big one to help with any embarrassment or any other emotions that come up for the depressed person. It's remind them that they matter, because depression lies. Like your consistent presence in this person's life can help combat those lies. You helping with a small task, like, can help remind them that they matter. And that's huge. And so when someone you care about is struggling, like, it can be really easy to fall into feeling helpless. And so I also wanted to offer some additional things that could be helpful as well. So being patient. Like, remember, healing is not linear, and your support matters even when progress is slow. Ask how you can help support them. Like, different people need different kinds of help. And so even just asking can be very supportive. Another thing is respecting the depressed person's boundaries. Like, some people need space while others need more connection or need more help. And then, again, last but not least, like, educate yourself. Like, learn about depression and anxiety and HSP traits so that you can better understand the depressed person's experience. And if you're listening to this, which, like, if you're here, you are, like, this is part of educating yourself. So, like, celebrate and commend yourself for that, because it's important to remember that there's only so much that you can do. And that can be something really, really hard to sit with. Like, when I was trying to support my husband and he was in the throes of a major depressive episode and on the brink of suicidality, like, it's really hard to sit with. There's only so much I can do. So I can very much empathize with that. And ultimately, we all need to be our own advocate. Like, we or they must take the steps to heal. We or they can do the work to change the trajectory, right? But sometimes we need a little help. Sometimes we need support. But ultimately, we are responsible for ourselves and our experience. And when you're in the throes of a depressive episode, it can be hard to really own that. And that's where the support comes in. And also note, like, if you are highly sensitive and you are supporting others through, like, these major depressive episodes or anxiety episodes, like, you might find yourself, like, absorbing or empathizing with others' pain. So make sure to set your own boundaries and make sure that you care for your own emotional well-being as well, because that is really, really, really important. I want to talk about why it's important to celebrate life even when we're depressed, because every day, even on the darkest ones, like, it truly is a chance to celebrate life. It's celebrating our victories. It's honoring our struggles and just everything in between. And again, all of this isn't just a story about depression. Like, it truly is about a celebration of life in, like, all its messiness. Like, this is part of our human experience. Like, let's just own all of it. We don't have to run from it. And it's about showing up even when things are hard. It's about recognizing that vulnerability is strength. And it's about honoring the connections that make life truly worth living. And this past December, I put all of these kind of principles into action by hosting a celebration of life party for myself and for my birthday. And I didn't want to wait for my funeral for people to share fond memories, like, after I'm gone. Like, instead, like, I really wanted to create a space for connection right now. And I wanted to hear the funny stories and embrace the heartfelt moments and gently be poked and roasted in, like, a loving way, right? I wanted to create that connection. And I wanted to gather evidence that directly contradicts depression's lies. And this celebration was an act of self-care. And it was also a statement of defiance, yes, defiance, against this disease that tries to isolate me. Because again, even in the darkest moments, like, we can take tiny steps, and these steps can make positive changes, and they do make a difference in our lives and for those around us. And, like, I was so honored and, to be quite honest, like, very surprised by how many people showed up to celebrate me in December. And I had a blast putting it together. Like, I look back on hosting that celebration of life party and I realize it truly embodied everything that I've shared today. And in that gathering, like, I practiced self-advocacy and healing that I learned through therapy. I implemented intentional goal setting and thought work from coaching in trying to move through vulnerability. Like, I showed up authentically despite my depression and my anxiety. Like, I honored my sensitivity to those emotions and that experience rather than trying to hide it. I owned the experience. And as I was going through that, like, it was extremely vulnerable because, like, I was sharing this experience, and some people, like, my close circle knew about what I was going through, but other people that I love and wanted to be at this party, like, they didn't necessarily know the depth of all of it. And so it was very vulnerable, like, especially as a life coach who I think oftentimes people think that, like, we have it all together because we have all the tools and stuff, right? And it's like, no, like, we're still human. Like, these are still things we go through. So it was extremely vulnerable to go through that process. And I was so rewarded for it. It was amazing. So some final thoughts for you. Like, the journey through depression and anxiety as a highly sensitive person, like, again, I can't stress this enough. Like, it's not linear. Like, some days therapy is what we need most, processing these past wounds and rebuilding our foundation. Other days, coaching is what propels us forward with actionable steps and, like, these huge mindset shifts. And sometimes medication just becomes that bridge that allows us to access the best of both. And this is why I strongly believe in kind of breaking down these falsehoods or just some of these stories that we have around mental health and mental wellness, and this idea that they're separate territories, right? And that because they're very interconnected. They're these interconnected landscapes. They require multiple pathways of care, and, like, this is especially true for us who are sensitive, who just experience the world more deeply, who have a very rich internal experience. So whether you are currently in the depths of depression, you are supporting someone who is, or you're just simply trying to understand, like, what these complex experiences are, like, remember this aspect. It is integration, not isolation, that is the key. Integration. Bringing it all together, this holistic approach. Coaching and therapy. Biology and psychology. Vulnerability and strength. Past healing and future building. Like, life is messy. Like, it just is. The human experience is messy. It's a roller coaster. And so by embracing all of these facets of support and showing up authentically for yourself, even on the hardest days, like, we don't just survive. Like, we eventually do learn to thrive in ways that honor our sensitive souls. And don't get me wrong, it's not like we're going to hit a thriving moment and then that's going to last forever. Because, again, that's not how humans work. That's not how life works. And so we need to acknowledge our inherent worthiness, because it's like our worthiness is true regardless of what depression or anxiety tries to tell us. So I am extremely grateful that you have joined me in this raw conversation today. And I want to, like, let's continue to support each other with compassion and wisdom that we as just sensitive people have. Like, it's such a gift. And yes, it does come with some challenges, including things like this chronic depression and anxiety that I personally deal with and many other people deal with. But, like, there's such a richness to it as well. And we need to remember that aspect as often as we can. So we understand that our sensitivity, again, while it's sometimes challenging, it ultimately can be our greatest strength, because it helps us connect with each other and with the world. And that's huge. I mean, that's ultimately what life is about, right? So I also want to say, like, if like, please call the US hotline by dialing 988 if you are struggling with major depression or suicidal thoughts to get immediate support. So 988 specifically in the US. And if you're not in the US, like, do a quick Google search of international hotlines. There's a list that I have referred people to. It's on Open Counseling's website. That's very comprehensive. I'll put a link in the show notes that has hotlines for like so many different countries. It's such a great resource. So if this is something that you're struggling with, or you know someone that is, like, please send them this podcast, send them these hotlines if they need immediate help. But I hope that today, even though it was a little bit longer episode than what I typically do, I felt like very, very strongly that this was the first episode I needed to bring to the forefront after this long break. So I've missed you. Thank you for being here with me today. And as always, remember, shining bright gives others permission to shine as well. Take care, my friend. Hey, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you want to learn how to tap into the powerful force of nature you know exists within you, head on over to coachwithcam.com and take the Elemental Energy Type quiz. You'll discover more about how your sensitivity isn't a weakness, but rather the place where your strengths come from. And if you enjoyed the show, make sure to follow, rate, and review it on your favorite podcast platform, and share it with a friend or family member who you want to connect with on a deeper level. You'll be helping other sensitive folks like us find and join our amazing community. So let's connect and support each other on this incredible journey.